Hey there guys, my name's Zed. This is part 2 of a 4-part series on EQ. In part 1 we covered the basics of EQ, the fundamentals of how it works, why we need to use it and how best to use it. The link to that video is in the description below. Today we're going to talk about EQ on vocals. Let's get into it right now. So the first thing to point out here is that the human voice, much like the human body, comes in all shapes, sizes, sounds and qualities. There are no fixed rules to EQ, but there are some suggestions and I'll guide you through how to start so we can get on with getting great mixes. The second thing to point out is that microphones do vary and have different sonic characteristics. This varies from model to model and from brand to brand, and it is a good idea to have an awareness of what equipment you're using when recording a vocalist or yourself to get a better understanding of how to EQ your vocals. And the most important thing, I think, is that vocals are the most important part of any song, and that's coming from a drummer. People get attached to songs emotionally via the lyrics, and they remember it and recognize the song via the melody. So we have to get the vocals sounding great in any mix, and my suggestion with any mix would be to start with the vocals, get them sounding as good as possible, and then shape all the other instruments around that so your vocals stand out. Let's dive into the video and start talking about how we're going to EQ these. So here we are in Logic and we have a male vocal example here. This just so happens to be something I've sang, so excuse the vocals. It is off a song coming out later this year called I Wish. There's no auto-tune or compression or processing or anything on this. It's completely dry. Let's hear how that sounds on its own. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a parametric EQ, and we discussed what they are in the first video. And by clicking this box here, it brings up a plugin native to Logic, and it's just a generic parametric EQ. So the first good thing to do with all vocals, especially live, but also in the studio, is to put a high-pass filter. What this does is we'll filter anything below a certain frequency. So for example, we're going to turn on the high-pass filter. We're going to sweep this up to 100 Hertz, and what that's going to do is eliminate background noise such as traffic rumbling in the distance, computer fans, lighting, any kind of electrical buzzers, etc., just to help clear up the signal. It's very rare that someone will project lower than 100 Hertz in their voice. I've only come across it a couple of times. Most people don't. Most people project above that, so this is just a great way to start off cleaning the signal up. So one thing I forgot to mention in the first video is this analyzer feature here in this EQ, which is really useful because it enables you to see what frequencies are coming up as well as hearing them. It's a visual aid as well, which I personally find quite helpful. Shouldn't always rely on these things, but it is a useful guide. There's two settings, post and pre. At the moment it's set to post, which means the graph in the plugin is going to represent anything affected by the EQ, but we want it pre because we want to hear where the hotspots are coming into the computer. So let's set that to pre. The next thing to bear in mind is but and puss sounds. As you can hear, they're quite annoying. Now, ideally in a studio, we would use a pop shield, which will help eliminate those. But if we don't have those, the magic frequency number for those is about 100 to 150. What I suggest is going through your vocal and sweeping the EQ like I'm doing on the screen now, just to listen to where those sounds are quite harsh. Moving on up, the low-mid frequencies from about 100 to 250 is where the boomy sounding frequencies are, certainly in the male voice. The low-mid frequencies between about 100 and 250 are where the boomy frequencies can be heard. I'd say this is more prominent live than in the studio. However, it's worth having a sweep just to see if there's anything in this area that bothers you or is overpowering. I personally don't have loads in my vocal at these frequencies, but do be careful when you're EQing this because, for example, if there's a baritone singer and their voice is particularly low, a lot of these frequencies will be the characteristic of their voice. So it might be worth going a bit more surgical. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. So yeah, about 210, there's a bit of resonance that I don't really like, so I'm going to drop that out just a little bit. So there's not loads of this frequency in my voice personally, but this is the frequency range where a lot of the warmth comes from, and like I said, a lot of the character comes from. So we want to be careful, and if we need to, we can go surgical on this and just take out the troublesome frequencies by narrowing the cue point like that. that enables us to be more accurate. So moving up the spectrum, we get to 250 to 600 hertz, which is where the boxy sounds can come from, where a vocal can just sound a bit too middly, and as if it's on a radio in the next room or something. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. So for my voice, it's about 500, and I'll be honest, 500 hertz is a frequency I'm not a fan of across most instruments anyway. So I would choose to dip a little bit there. Again, like I've said before, this is going to be different for everyone, so you have to trial and error with your vocal track or your own voice. Moving past that to the higher mids, from maybe 600 to 1.25 kilohertz is where we get, or where we can get quite nasally sounds. For my voice, for example, about 1K and it starts getting a little bit nasally. The effect this can have is that if there's too much 1K in a voice, it can make the whole thing sound a bit thin. So we want to try and avoid that. So we may need to cut that, or it may just be a case of boosting lower frequencies to compensate for that. That's a decision you have to make for yourself. But let's have a listen to this track. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. So just by dipping a little bit at 1K there, it just sounds a bit warmer and a little bit fuller, I think. So moving on up the frequency range there, the 1K to 3 kilohertz region is where the sharpness and the clarity of a voice is going to be. And this frequency range really helps the voice sit above the mix and above the other instruments. This frequency range can be tricky, certainly in female voices. A lot of female voices are prone to having a lot of 1.5 to 1.6 kilohertz, which can be really piercing. So we may need to take some of that out. But in general, if you're struggling for presence and you want your vocal to sit above guitars, for example, in a mix, try playing around with this frequency range and this may help. Let's see how that sounds on my voice. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. So if I take that out too much, it's going to get quite dull, and pushing it just gives it a brightness, gives it some more attack. Moving up a bit further as well, if you want more presence in your vocal track, 3 to 6K is a good region for just giving a bit more solidarity to the top end there. Let's have a listen to that. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. Again, it's going to help separate your vocal from other instruments. Now, the troublesome frequency range in most voices is between 6 and 10K, which is where we get the sibilance sound. And usually I find they're around 6 or 8K, and how we can identify those is using a narrow cue point again and sweeping across and just listening out for the s sounds. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. And I will try to run from you, but... Ooh, yeah, so about 9K in this example is pretty harsh, and you can hear that harsh high-frequency sound coming through. So let's drop that a little bit. There is another tool called a de-esser we can use, which, hence the name de-ess. Logic has its own de-esser plugin, and what that does is enables you to set a threshold. So when the volume of a certain frequency is too high, it will then squash that down. I'm going to explain this in another video though, so don't worry about that too much now. But in the meantime, if you want to filter out those harsh sibilant sounds, we can use cue points to identify where they are and then cut them accordingly. So moving above 10K, most voices don't have much above 10 to 12K, and certainly above 12 to 16K. It's not really audible. However, it can be felt. There's an airiness to this frequency range, possibly more audible in female vocals, but let's just try this with a high shelf on my track now. I won't make excuses, but I need you to hold on tight. I don't hold the answers, but I know that this feels right. And I will try to run from you, but don't give up this fight. It's not that there's a significant change to the sound by me pulling those frequencies out, but there's a texture there. There's a lightness if I add in anything above 10K, and it starts sounding a little bit dull. Without necessarily losing definition, it starts sounding a bit dull if you take those frequencies out. To help me out with this video today, so we have a female voice to analyze, my friend Chess Galea has very kindly donated a vocal track from her song Cellophane. Chess is a London-based soul and R&B singer, and there's a link to her YouTube page in the description below. Subscribe to that and check out her new single Catapult, which is out now. Chess is also available on Spotify. Let's have a listen to Chess's voice dry on its own, and I'm going to pull up the parametric EQ plugin and we can have a look at the analyzer graph and see which frequencies are prominent. And I'm going to sweep through with the parametric cue point so we can hear which frequencies are particularly hot in this mix.
I can't breathe, but I still want you to hold me.
So in this first part, Chess is using a head voice sound, and there's a lot going on at 500 and about 1K. Let's sweep through and see if we can maybe attenuate the sound and make them sound a little bit warmer.
Love controls me. Oh, take it easy, cause I know you'll disown me. Eventually, wrap me up in cellophane, so my heart can feel no pain.
And as Chess is moving down into more of a chess voice, we can see there's 200 coming out here, which adds to the warmth of the sound. Let's see if that needs boosting or reducing, or if there's any other way we can just warm this up a bit. We'll work on the top end in a second because there's a lot of sibilance.
Wrap me up in cellophane, so my heart can feel no pain. Protect myself from love today. Don't let me out, for heaven's sake. My stupid mouth.
So besides EQ here, how we can control this, certainly the low mids of a voice, is to use compression. That's another video, but just to smoothen those out, we can use compression. I wouldn't say there's any troublesome frequencies in this range with Chess, and I don't want to cut any because this is where the warmth can come from. Like I said, there's not much going on below 200, so I would be putting a high-pass filter up to certainly 100, possibly a bit more, just to clean up any ambient noise. Let's go to the top end because there is a lot of sibilance going on. Maybe we can attenuate that.
It was faster than my brain, missed my last train. Led in your embrace, I don't guess you said yes to the rest. I should have been stronger, I should have said this instead. Wrap me up.
You have to be careful attenuating the sibilant frequencies because you can take a voice from th sound to more th sound, and it can ruin the clarity. So that's my approach to EQing male and female vocals. If you found this video useful, please subscribe. If you've got value out of this video, please hit the like button. It really does help me on YouTube. In part 3, we're going to be talking about EQing the guitar and bass guitar. Stick around so you don't miss that episode, and I will, wait for it, I will see you on the next one.